you're getting your bike ready for spring, one of the first things that I can suggest is wash it. If you're like me, it's probably the only time of year that your bike gets actually cleaned and washed and polished. But it's a good time to wash it all down, clean everything off. Then you could start looking for spots with leaks or anything else, where if you have places that have a definite drip, then you have a problem. If you have a little bit of seepage around some sort of things, that's sort of normal on a lot of stuff over a period of time, so it's not to be concerned with. But if it's actual drips that start dripping, then it's something that should be addressed. But give your bike a good thorough clean and all over and wipe it down. And that way, when you first start your bike up and run it, you'll be able to see if there's oil coming out of different places or not. And like I say, if not, it's nice to have a nice clean bike when you first go out and start the season. So here's 10 quick tips on things that you can check to get your bike ready for spring. Checking your battery should be an important step, and it's located in a lot of different places. It can be under a side panel or it can be under your seat. Checking your terminals, your positive and your negative terminals, it wouldn't hurt to take these off and clean these mounts out. Here we have quite a bit on the ground terminal, and it's a problem that I see quite often, is that bikes have a bad ground and it causes a variety of problems. So undoing this bolt, cleaning this off, cleaning these cables off, and making sure that you have a good ground from your battery strap will assure you a lot of trouble-free miles. Check your motorcycle's battery with a multimeter by putting one connection onto the negative terminal and touching the other one onto the hot. And you can see that we're floating there just over 12. When your bike is running, this number should be about 13.5. If it's under 12, then your bike is just running off the battery and it's not really charging, or it's charging poorly. For many of you that think ahead, a small battery tender is used through the winter time and it keeps your battery up to snuff. An area that's often overlooked on these pre-2000 bikes especially, right from the early shovel heads right up to the Evolutions, is this alternator plug here. It can come loose and come out far enough that you're not making a connection there. So it doesn't hurt to take all this off, clean these terminals, replace your plug in, and make sure that it's seated in there nice and tight. Now mine wasn't even seated in there tight from the previous season. Without that, that's your charging system. So then your battery will go dead very quickly and you'll be dead in the water on the road. Once called out for a service call out on the highway not far from here, and there were 7 motorcycles out there and one guy was dead in the water on the road. They were all looking and couldn't figure it out. They said, oh, we put a full charge in it before we left the city, which was about 60 miles away, and he was dead again. So they were calling me to come pick it up. Upon closer inspection, it was this smaller plug. It had just come ajar and was hanging out, and not one of them had realized that it was loose. Checking that all your lights are working is something that's also important. A lot of people say what's behind you doesn't matter, but what's behind you does matter in these kind of situations. So check to make sure that your lights are working. The license plate light here for a license plate, and that brake light. You want to check your foot brake, and you also want to check your handbrake to make sure that it's working. Signal lights on my particular model are a little bit lower. And your signal light for your other side. Checking your front lights is also important. We'll check our signals on this side, and they're working. And the signals on this side, and it's working. Our high and low beams, and last but not least, your horn button. Now you know that all those lights are working and that you're ready to go. So it's a small check, but you can check for cracked lenses, anything like that that's on them, lenses that are about to fall out. They all want to be in good shape because you want a good season of riding without any problems, so this is the time to check it. Next, check your throttle and idle cables. A lot of times they sit around and they haven't been used over the winter and they can crud up, or maybe they were just in hard shape to start with. Make sure that your throttle springs back like it should. Okay. Quickly returning back to its position so that it doesn't get hung up or anything. It's also a good idea that, depending on your time and how much care you put in your bike, to take the cables off and lube them up with some cable lube. And make sure that they're all nice lubricated and away to go. So we just work the cable back and forth, and we make sure that our other end is wet and put them back on. It's a little bit more work, and it depends upon your ability and what you want to do. Now we'll just adjust the throttle up to take all the slack out. But you can do it or have your mechanic do those sort of things for you. One of the next things out there is your tires. An often overlooked item especially on baggers, when you've got a big bag on here and long fenders. I see so many people out there that you point out to them, hey, your tire's looking pretty worn down. And I've seen many with the metal showing through, and the customer went, oh, I didn't know that. You can measure your tread depth. Anything below a 1/16 of an inch is time to replace your tire. So it's easy to take your ruler and just put it in there like that. Some have wear bars across them, and when that bar becomes smooth with the tire, then they're worn out. Another point is to check your tire pressures and go by the manufacturer spec on your tire to tell you how much air it should have. Actually shows us that we have 42 pounds per square inch is what we should have in a cold tire. You'll be looking for weather cracking and such on your tires. You can look in these areas and you'll start seeing little cracks in them. The tire would definitely have to be replaced. Next, another important aspect of your bike is your brakes. You want to make sure that your brake pedals and your handles are nice and firm when you push the brakes on. If you push that down and hold your foot on it and it keeps going down and keeps going down, then you've got a problem. You should have a good reaction that stays solid when you hold it and not bleed down. If the pedal starts to sink down and sink down and sink down, then your brakes definitely need to be looked at. Always check all your fittings where your brakes connect onto here and throughout the motorcycle, right back to the caliper. Make sure that there's no leaking and no drips in here around the caliper or the bleeder screw or any sort of connections. And again, check for chafing on any sort of rubber lines or anywhere like that. But with a lot of brake pads today, you can look right in and see the brake pads in there. If you're just about down to the metal when you peek in there, means your brake pads are pushed out as far as they can. So you want your brakes to be nice when you put the pedal on, off, and your wheel is released nicely. Your brake fluid should always be checked. If you take the top off your master cylinder and you look in there and it's muddy and it's brown, best to clean that whole unit out. Check the top of your lids, and written in here in small letters is usually the type of brake fluid that your machine will require. What we do here is sop it all out as best we can. But your brake fluid should be changed every couple of years anyway, so then we'll fill it full of fresh fluid and pull it through with a vacuum pump all through the whole system and right out the bleeder screw until we're getting nice clean fluid out of there and we know the system is flushed out. Put a little line in there. We're above the sight glass. This should be done on your front brake and your rear brakes. So just take the two little screws to take the top off, have a look inside and see what you're up to in there. It's a major detail that should be handled in order for you to have efficient brakes and keep your system working clean. For those with a belt drive, you can always check your belt tension here. And I always like to have a little bit of play in it. I see them really slack and I see them singing tight. And if they're too tight, they'll just cause wear on your transmission pulley, seal, up front, and everything else. Your belt should be running in the center of that pulley. If it's running hard to one side, it means that the wheel has to be adjusted one way or another to allow this to center up. And you want it this way so we're not wearing on the sides of the belt and causing any sort of torque or anything in the wrong direction. If you're running a chain, it's the same sort of basic thing running in the center of your sprocket for alignment one side or the other. If your sprockets are getting like this and they're getting to a sharp point on the top, they might not have yet rolled over, but there's problems brewing there and the sprocket is getting worn out. This is a used sprocket, but still in good shape. The tops of these actually have flats across the top. In most cases, the chain and the front and the rear sprockets you replace together as a unit if they're worn badly. Another big issue for starting your bike up in the spring, and this is a common mistake, when you first start that bike up, especially with the pre-2000s bike, a lot of times because of the old check ball system in the oil pump, which was common from the 30s right up till the 2000 in the oil pumps, it's just a ball bearing on a spring, and that's all that stops the oil from going from the oil tank into your engine. So it's quite common for the oil to seep by that spring and get down in your engine, you know, and I have many guys call me, geez, I fired my bike up, there's a big splotch of oil underneath it. Oh, you know, what's wrong? What's wrong? Well, that's just that oil that has seeped down through, and if you run your bike a little bit, it'll pump itself out. But the mistake that a lot of people make is they pull the oil cap and they look in there and go, oh my God, I don't have much oil in there. So their immediate reaction is, well, I'll dump another quart in. Now your motor has too much oil in it. That oil cap is the path of least resistance. Sometimes it'll blow the oil cap right off it. If you look in there and you got some oil, fire that bike up, give it a second. Most times it'll fill that oil tank back up. Air filters is another thing. When's the last time you changed your air filter? Don't know? Maybe it's time to change it. On my particular bike here, I have an exposed air filter, so it's not quite as bad. But if you have a factory type air filter and everything's in there enclosed, it's a good time to take that cover off and check that before you start your bike. Here's an example of one that I took apart, and look what's inside of it. Wow. Mice been in that. Now, it didn't go into the engine because of the filter itself, but a mouse could have got in there and chewed through that filter as well, and when you first fired the motor up, all that stuff would go inside. So that's the time to take it apart, check your air filter. If you can't remember when the last time you cleaned it, at least blow the whole thing out with air, high compressed air, and get it cleaned out as best you can, and possibly consider putting a new air filter in to start your season. I guess it's really up to you. You're the rider. Getting out in the spring is a rush, and everybody's in a hurry to get going. But you know, take your time, take your bike, get a little patch of road by yourself, weave it from side to side, just feel the road, test your brakes, test your clutches. You know, you're an experienced driver, but it's been like 4 or 6 months of nothing. So it doesn't hurt just to refresh your muscle memory and get those things working. You're never too old to learn anything. A lot of us old time riders, I can tell you for sure, some bad habits. For you new riders out there, you know, the people that are just getting new to it, take the motorcycle course. You know, take the instructional course and get that under your belt. There's been lots of times when guys come in and, you know, they get their wives enrolled in the course, and I asked them, well, how did it go? And quite often they'd say, well, you know, I had to take it with her before she wouldn't do it. And each and every one of them said, you know, I didn't realize how many bad habits I really had. And they all felt they learned things, and they all felt it helped improve their riding skills. So don't think that you're the master of it all. My father taught motorcycles in the military, off-road, and he used to always say to me, son, the day you think you're the master, it'll teach you who the master is. And I never forgot that. And I found myself in some close situations with that, but fortunately I always made it through. So it's your season to come and have fun. You know, it's your time to have fun or fail. Set yourself up for fun and set yourself up for success by checking that bike out, getting it ready, and when you throw your leg over it and get going, you'll be confident. You know that you've checked those things and it's all good. Don't forget, subscribe, like, ring the bell. It all helps. We're overwhelmed by the amount of people that are signing up and by the amount of views that I'm getting all around the world. So it's pretty exciting to me. And hopefully we can keep growing, and it's my time to enjoy things. So that's it for my summer tune-up. Hope you enjoyed. Now I gotta get back to work.